I'm Michael. Welcome to Beyond the Screenplay, the podcast where each episode we do a conversational deep dive analysis into a film. Today we are talking about La La Land, the 2016 film written and directed by Damien Chazelle. I'm joined by the Beyond the Screenplay team, Trisha Arand.
Hello, everyone.
Brian Bittner.
Hello.
And Alex Calleros.
Hi.
We got our first special Brian of the season.
It's been so long.
Yeah, it's great.
And we didn't even get any Michael Caine in our Interstellar. Not even a little bit.
I mean, we have to talk about The Dark Knight Rises soon, question mark.
Oh, I see. Never know.
Saving it.
Okay, so La La Land is a big swing. For your second studio feature, you're gonna make an epic Hollywood throwback modern musical, Ryan Gosling, Emma Stone, about like the Hollywood dream. Like, that's kind of insane. And it's kind of a miracle that this movie exists and is as lovely as it is. And the approach to it also, like, you're not gonna make it easy on yourself. You're going to do a lot of like long takes and shooting in realistic spaces and wide angles. Like, it feels like Damien Chazelle aimed high and then made it really hard on himself to like make this movie happen. And I kind of love the marriage of that insane ambition meta with the actual story, right? The idea of the dream of LA becoming famous and the sort of romantic, on one hand, romantic picture of what it means to come to LA and try to be a star and make your dreams come true. And then this movie also has room for the sort of bittersweet, sacrifices must be made if you are going to commit to that. And so this movie also kind of gets to exist in the same kind of thematic continuation as Whiplash, right? His first major film that's very much about that, the obsessed performer, as our video talks about. So this movie, I felt very complicated about it at the time, because in some ways it feels like a movie that like I could have made and that my friends could have made, because like he is of our generation. Like, Damien's like a year older, I think, than, me. And so it was weird seeing that on the screen, and I had complicated feelings about that personally. But also it was just really cool to see kind of the first of this new generation start to take off and soar. One best director, a youngest director ever. Like, it was just a really interesting time, and it all kind of happens in this movie about LA, about the dream. And so I haven't seen it start to finish since I saw it in theaters, and I think I liked it the first time, and then I thought about it more, and I was like, I don't know how I feel about it, and I'm feeling complicated. And then I became obsessed with Another Day of Sun, the opening song. Like, I would just play it over and over again. And like, I remember driving and listening to it and like crying, like being emotional, like something about just the audaciousness and the celebration of this dream, like, really moved me. And so it was really fascinating coming back to this movie, watching it again, kind of like we talked about in Interstellar, prepared for the bumps, the things that I knew were kind of jarring for me the first time, so that I could look past those and just focus on the experience of it. And it's just lovely and really like charming. Emma Stone and Ryan Gosling are cheat codes, and they do great. And there's just so much in this movie. Like, I can feel the bumps. I can feel the straining to force this movie to happen. And sometimes that stresses me out. And then there are these other moments where it all hits and works perfectly together. That ending is gorgeous. And so there's just a lot here that I want to talk about. And I feel like it is such a big swing and has all the bumps to show for it and the scrapes and bruises, but also reaches something unique and special because of it. So I'm very excited to talk about it. I want to hear from you guys, your thoughts on La La Land. Trisha, do you want to start us off?
Sure. I really, really like this movie. I have lots to say. One of the first is just a full disclosure thing, which is that I am acquainted with the Chazelle family. Anna, who's in this movie, Damien's sister, Anna Chazelle, is one of my very good friends. And so I I have these like, they're not rose colored glasses, but they're friend colored glasses, I'm going to call them when it comes to this movie. Which is just that it's special to me. There's like that's added sprinkle of specialness being like, I don't know, I'm just really proud of her. And she's in this, and it's just lovely to see something that, you know, even if you don't know this family, you can tell that not just them, but everybody who made it is like, their heart is just right here. This movie, like, the heart is on the sleeve of the movie, and everybody who made it. It feels like so pure, and the celebration of movies and why we're all here in this very hot, very complicated town, and like very expensive, and it's a struggle, and it's hard, and it's I don't know, it's a lovely portrayal of all of it. And so yeah, I will say I didn't know Anna or was like Damien by extension. I didn't know any of that when I saw this movie first. And so going into it, though, I was already a fan because I was a fan of Whiplash. And the hype was really high. And I like watched the trailer a bunch of times and I was like, I can't wait to see this movie. And in some ways, it just bowled me over. Like, I love the color palette of it. I love the, old-fashioned approach, like the cinemascope of it and the like long takes with the camera back so we can see full body shots of people dancing and playing piano and all of that stuff. A lot of the stuff that I love about old musicals is here as well. I do remember feeling, as like, I think a lot of people did, there was some, I think it's not a perfect movie in every frame of it, or just that there was a lot going on around it in like culture that made it all feel kind of like fraught. And I think it is youthful, and that's works to the movie's advantage in many ways, but doesn't have the polish that I think that we've seen from Damien later and will continue to see later in his career. So it's got, you know, you're kind of holding it with both hands. And then but watching it now, the bumps didn't bump as hard and the exhilaration was even higher. And so I just had a great time watching it. I watched it with my family. I watched it with my 10-year-old niece who had a blast. And she was like, this movie's so cool. Like, it was so fun to get to share it. So yeah, I can't wait to get into it.
Awesome. Yeah. Cool. Alex, what about you?
Yeah, you identified, Michael, the generational thing with this movie. And I think, like you, I mean, we were at the time, I think we'd kind of stalled out for a moment around 2015, 2016. We were on a roll making a bunch of, small productions and had this group of friends. And, eventually money came into the equation of like, we can't just keep making movies for free forever, I guess. We have to pay people, and this is not sustainable. Anyway, so in that moment, I think we were both coming out of a time of just like really energetic creation, and just with our friends in LA, all of us with impossible dreams, all of us just trying to like make cool stuff. And this movie, going to see it and revisiting it now, brings back that feeling of like you said, Trisha, youthful energy and exuberance. And I think, the ambition of the style and the commitment to the long takes and the color palette and all that stuff reminds me of myself at that time, just wanting to go for it. And I love that this movie exists, and I can actually kind of access that part of myself through it in a lot of ways. And I think he is almost speaking very specifically to this millennial generation, kind of, pre our current era, whatever era we're living in now. Dystopia, AI. Anyway, kind of this moment in time of like millennial youthful exuberance and creativity and just kind of excitement to be here. And I love it for that. And so, and the music, I love that the melodies are really catchy. I found myself humming them a lot after watching it this week. So it's just, I don't know. Yeah, I have a lot of love for this movie. And I do agree that there's a couple sections and sequences that are bumps for me. But all in all, I can just feel the love, as you were saying, Trisha. And I love it when a movie is so full of love and exuberance. It doesn't happen very often. And it's great to see like an original musical as well, not an adaptation, but just like an original movie musical. When do we get these ever? So anyway, very positive feelings right now for La La Land, and kind of, I really love the specificity of the generational transmission that is happening here. And it feels innocent in a lovely way right now.
Yes. Yeah. No, yeah, I think it's clear that like an older person could not have made this movie. Like this was clearly made by someone of this generation by this generation. Yeah, 100%. Brian, what about you?
Yeah, I think similar thing in the sense of like the distance from this movie has helped me at the time. I think I was in a bit of a disillusioned place or something, and watching this, it just hit me in a really uncomfortable way. I think in that way where it's like if you've been through some, traumatic experience and then you see a movie that shows you that traumatic experience, it can be hard to watch, right? That's not what this was for me, but it was sort of like, oh man, like I feel like the hope and the joy that they're experiencing, I feel like not that. And it's hard to like watch that. And then obviously like Mia's disillusionment arc, I think there was something about it that just clicked with me in a way that was normally would be exciting for me, but instead it was sort of like, it just made me feel bad in a way that is no fault of the movie. It was just where I was in my life at the time. And I think in general, I was like, oh, the guy who made Whiplash, like he's making another movie and it's a musical. Like, well, is that actually a musical, or is it just like there's going to be music in it like Whiplash? And I was like, oh no, he's actually making music. Okay, I don't know if I'm excited about it just because of my musical baggage, right? So I think I had complicated feelings when I saw it the first time. Still positive, like it wasn't really the movie's fault. It was just my own personal things. But I was like, I enjoyed the movie, just never really, I think, watched it again until watching it for this. Did have a great moment, though, last year where a friend was visiting with his 15 and 13-year-old sons. And we were doing touristy stuff. So we went for a hike up to the Griffith Observatory. And, the 15-year-old was just being like, all right, like, yeah, whatever, this is fine. Can we go? Can we go home? Just dragging his feet and going inside and looking at the clock thing, the magnetic clock thing, just being
Foucault
like, yeah,
pendulum.
cool, whatever. Yeah, that's what I said. And just being like, yeah, whatever. My watch tells the time too, and then we're like hanging out that night. They were staying with us, and he was like mentioning that he was really into movies. I'm like, oh, what are your favorite movies? And he's like, oh, Whiplash and La La Land. And I was like, oh, cool. Like Damien Chazelle, same filmmaker. He's like, yeah, totally. And I was like, oh, so how cool we went to the observatory today. And he's like, what? I was like, the place we went, that's where they go. And he's like, and suddenly like freaked out and is like FaceTiming his sister. You could see it like out of our window, kind of. He's like, see that little light on the hill? That's from La La Land.
Wow.
That's cute.
You're the most 15-year-old that is ever 15-year-old.
Also excellent taste for a 15-year-old.
Absolutely. Yeah. I was impressed. So anyway, watching it now with that distance, I was just like, oh, hell yeah. Like I just had a blast watching it. I kind of made a note early on where I was like, it doesn't feel like it's trying to be musical. And I think that it's a 2-hour and 8-minute movie, and there are like 6 musical numbers, maybe, and not talking about, we've talked about diegetic music versus not, which is like, if Ryan Gosling is up on stage playing a song, that's not a musical number. That's the character as a musician, he's playing a song. If they're dancing in the sky, that is like singing to each other or doing a choreographed dance, that is clearly like a musical number that exists in the sort of fabric of this movie. And there's only a few of those where it just feel like, oh yeah, I'm just watching like a really focused character story, and occasionally they're going to sing and dance, and that feels to me better than I think musicals where it just feels like there's going to be some dialogue once in a while outside of this like string of 25 musical numbers throughout the course of the movie, many of which aren't doing anything plot-wise or character-wise. And in this movie, it feels like they're always doing something, even if they're doing something thematic, like the opening, number or whatever, where it's just sort of like it's setting the stage, it's setting the scene. So that it reminded me of In the Heights a little bit, and like that sort of texture of we're not going to. If you have like Wicked, where it feels like we're almost, what is the movie version of, you're in an auditorium and the scene or scenery is painted and stuff, but what's like the most gorgeous, high production value, amazing version of that you can do. That's what a movie like Wicked feels to me, and that's beautiful. But then there's the other side of it, which is the like, how do we just shoot a movie that just looks like any other movie we would shoot, but also people are going to sing and dance at the same time. And I really like that about this movie, and the color palette and everything is so cool, and there's just a lot to really love about it. And I really appreciate the story and the performances and the characters and everything, where it just kind of at the end when we have that final montage, I'm like, yeah, you absolutely 100% got me, movie.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, I mean, so I think it's, hearing all of us speak, it's, I think, clear that we all live in LA and we're all here because we love movies. And so talking about movies that are about people who love movies that are in LA because they love movies, there's a lot of layers that are happening and interfacing all at once here. And yeah, I think that's one of the things that in a lot of ways, so if I were to put on my analytical, objective, like narrative analysis hat on, I think there's a lot in the character arcs that don't feel super set up in hypercritical ways. And I think some of the motivations happen a little bit too fast for me. Like the conflict that kind of drives them apart happens all at once in a single scene. And it feels like, oh, you don't feel like the same people that I've seen in the other scenes in some ways. And there are some moments where even as they're falling in love, the kind of who they are outside of the musical numbers feels a little detached from who they are inside the musical numbers for me. I'm thinking about, the Griffith Park walking, dancing, long take shot. It's beautiful and great and really fun to watch. But I didn't get like the smooth handoff between like how what was happening in the diegetic world led to the musical. Like it felt like the musical number did all of that work. So there are these weird moments where I feel like narratively, character arc wise, everything isn't quite landing exactly right to push it forward. But those numbers, when they happen, are so great, and the performances are so great, and the chemistry between them and the kind of emotional aspects of it kind of fill that in an interesting way. And so like my logic brain sets off some alarms of like, that's not quite right. But then the next sequence begins and I'm swept away. And it's a really interesting example of, I think, the style is doing work, but not in a way that's like a replacement for content. It's like that there is substance in the style, in the filmmaking. Like it is conveying emotional meaning. It's not just there for flashiness. And I think this movie is kind of really unique in that way, where I don't know. There's just something about, I love the way he shoots the live performance numbers where like, they're in the jazz club, the camera whipping back and forth, the intense editing between all these insert shots of like the drums and like the horn close up, like all of that is like, I get upset because it's so good and it just like sweeps you away. And so it's just, I think that one of the big swing aspects of this movie for me is that somehow the style and the passion kind of makes up for some lack of, the more perfectionistic narrative script work. And it's just kind of interesting to study for that reason.
Totally.
Yeah, I think music and musicals in general have this magical power. I talked about it when we talked about Wicked. Like there is some sort of a witchcraft going on here where you have the right melodies, the right tunes that you can you can bring back. You introduce a melody, a chord progression early in the movie, you can bring it back and like bring back up emotions tied to a certain character or situation. And this movie doesn't have that many songs, as we've been talking about. It doesn't have that many different melodies in its kind of score, but the melodies it does have, it uses repeatedly at different moments to just kind of cheat code your way into emotional storytelling. And I think it's that millennial energy, like you're saying, Michael, where yes, maybe there weren't all the rewrites and layers needed to have the perfect arc to lead to that, breakup discussion. I totally agree with you that when that comes in the movie, it's like, whoa, where'd this come from? But we haven't, this wasn't building. This just happened all in one scene. It's a good scene, and I kind of ultimately believe it. And the things that come out are interesting, but they're not building through the whole movie. So yes, there are things lacking there, but the filmmaker director passion is so high, and the dedication to all the things we've been talking about that directors are in charge of besides the writing, which is the mise en scène, the music, the cinematography, the editing, the flow of everything. That is almost more what I can feel Damien Chazelle is interested in this movie. And because of the power of musicals, it basically works to, like you're saying, fill in the deficits that may exist in the script.
Yeah, I was thinking about the character arcs this time around, and I essentially agree that they're sparse on the page. However, I was noticing more of Mia's like cynicism or like sort of disillusionment at the outset this time around, where the first audition we see her in is that one where, she gets interrupted basically. She's like really crying, emoting. She's on the phone and, then like somebody walks in and they're talking about lunch or whatever. And she, she's giving an incredible performance and no one is noticing. She walks out, right? And then there's 100 girls that look just like her in the lobby, and she gets into the elevator between two.
All wearing her work outfit.
Oh, yeah. But except hers is covered in coffee, obviously.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was feeling that like no one ever, Mia at no point ever says to her roommates, I'm really disillusioned. Maybe I should go back to Boulder City. I'm just tired of doing this whole thing. And actually, when she talks to Sebastian about her journey, she doesn't quite say that either. She still kind of seems like wide-eyed and breathless. But I think that scene does a lot of work to put that, sort of create this snapshot of who she is at the beginning of the movie, which is someone who's tired of doing it this way. And I love the little montage too of Mia, like, doing, I don't know, it's like 4 auditions or 5 auditions or whatever it is. And they're all really like silly and she's, it just feels useless, right? It feels like she's spinning her wheels. Emma Stone has amazing comedic timing and she's fantastic.
No, you be tripping or whatever.
Oh yeah. So they should always let her do comedy. But yeah, I feel like that, seeing her being super disillusioned, and then, by the time she meets Sebastian, again, she's kind of settled into a boring relationship with this boring guy who's just nothing in the movie. And then she meets someone who is so passionate about his artistic pursuits that he's broke. And it kind of renews her belief in what she came out here to do. And then when the relationship fails, it's at the same time as the dream fails and she packs up and goes home, right? The one woman show that goes badly is the same night he doesn't come to the show and she decides to pack it up and go back to Boulder City. So I do think it's there. It's not in the dialogue. And it definitely could be clearer because there's a lot of other kind of muddiness around it in the first act, I think. But it is certainly in the text enough that I could really track it this time around and was appreciating it.
Yeah, it made me think about a lot of things. I was also thinking about Les Miserables, which was a few years earlier than this, where it's like we have the Anne Hathaway's That I Dreamed a Dream, where it's just like slow pushing on her doing the entire song and just like all the emotions and everything. And that's very much what the audition scene feels like in this, except it's done to almost pull the rug out from under you the way it's pulling it out from under her, where it's like, here's the scene, here's the Naomi Watts and Mulholland Drive scene. We're going to show you like what a good actor she is and how much she cares about this and how hard she's trying. And we do get that. And then we get, oh, hey, lunch is here. Thanks a lot. See you later. We'll call you. Don't call us, and that's really interesting to me, the way that it does that. But also what this movie doesn't do, as you were just pointing out there, Tricia, is for a musical, it doesn't have the "This is what I want" song,
No,
right? Yeah, And like, now this thing happened and I'm going to like stare up at the moon and languish about it for 6 minutes, you know?
Thank God.
And yeah, exactly. Right. And I think that's what I really appreciate about this movie is that when when the musical numbers happen, I'm ready for them. I'm not oversaturated with them. You know, I'm just kind of like, cool, let's do it. Because it is very smart about saying like, you get it. You know, there's a little flash in a montage where she takes off her apron at work and hands it to her boss, right? We don't need anything more than that. We know exactly what that little gesture means, right? In the same way that we see her, the way that she looks at the actress who comes in to get her coffee at the beginning of the movie, and then she becomes that actress at the end of the movie. It's like, we don't need any lines of dialogue. We don't need anything, right? We need that thing shown to us once and shown to us again. We need the look on her face, I think we need in the first time we see it. And that's it. Like, that's literally all we need to know. Like, this is what she wants and this is what she has acquired. And I think that that's what makes this movie feel like smart and not doing the sort of beating you over the head thing that I think for me, sometimes musicals can feel like they're doing.
Mm.
Yeah, I will say that on the topic of the Thing I Want song, because I was thinking about that also ever since you introduced that idea, Trisha. That's all I can think about now when I watch musicals.
You're welcome.
Yes, thank you. I think I was missing that. Or rather, I think like one of the scenes that I remember has always kind of made me disoriented a little bit is the getting ready to go out.
Someone in the
scene,
crowd.
The Someone in the Crowd
Yeah.
musical number. Because I don't quite know what it's about or what it's saying. And it's interesting because in some ways it feels like we're going to introduce some supporting characters and they're going to help me kind of understand different takes on the theme and we're going to get to know them across the movie. But we don't. They essentially disappear after that kind of sequence. But there's something about the, getting out there, putting herself out there. And I think, we have this sort of sad ending where she's looking in the mirror and talking about just being someone in the crowd. So it's one of the sequences it feels like it's almost doing something, but I've never been able to like grab a hold of it. And something about even how it's the flashiness and exuberance of it feels like disconnected from Mia's experience of it. Like, we've just seen her be sort of down in the bathroom, looking in the mirror, like not sure her place. And then it's this big explosive, splashy, literally, finale to the number. And so on one hand, it's this really fun, energetic, really well executed musical number. But I anyway am like very untethered from its meaning in the movie. And so that's just one of those interesting bumps where it feels like it maybe wants to be the something I want number, but I'm not quite sure what it's ultimately doing for me.
It's interesting because that number seems pretty clear to me up until the ending, because I think what it's getting at is the LA experience of she's resisting going out because she's exhausted from, as Trisha was identifying, just the endless auditions, the endless no's, and even going to a party is an exhausting kind of networking mandatory thing of who knows, maybe you'll meet the right person who will pick you out of the crowd. And that is all part of the actor experience in LA. And the party itself is a dud for her, as we see kind of in a montage with the guy hitting on her and being creepy. And so I think that's number would end perfectly with her in the bathroom, with the kind of quiet ending into the mirror. And it feels like everything after that is that youthful Damien Chazelle, just like, I want to do a fun thing now. And it's a fun, explosive ending, but it's not really, as you're saying, kind of on theme for her character necessarily. It's just maybe the party goes on and it's really crazy, but it's no longer about her after she leaves that bathroom.
Yeah. And to your point about the supporting characters, I was expecting to get to know them also. And I do think there's a little bit of disorientation there where they're actually a really small cast here. Like, it really is just kind of about the two of them. We have his sister who we see a couple times, but she's not really a character in a lot of senses. John Legend is probably the third hand in this.
Right.
In terms of actual people who have lines that we see frequently. And
Yeah,
so
and I was surprised rewatching it that like he's barely in it too. Like
Yeah.
he creates the idea of this career for Seb, but he's actually not in the movie as a character very much.
yeah, and I think that that's really surprising choice for a musical. Part of me wonders if it's because this is a relatively small scale musical, just in terms of budget and scope, right? Like we've identified that there's not, this isn't Wicked where they like built a village, several in fact, and like lots of huge sets and you have hundreds of extras or whatever. I was watching an interview video today with the choreographer, and she was saying that in Another Day of Sun, that opening number, that they had 30 dancers, and then the rest were like post-production, in the background kind of thing. And so 30 dancers is not very many for your big, opening ensemble number. And I know that this is being adapted to a Broadway musical, like a real Broadway musical. So I know, right off the bat, they're going to have to write a lot more music, a lot more music. And they're going to probably have to flesh out or introduce some new supporting characters, because what's here is lovely and really rich in terms of keeping the focus on the relationship. But there are a lot of other takes on the theme and other like push and pull things that could happen with supporting characters. Like if there were an actual B plot, there isn't, kind of, right? There's the, I guess you could call the A plot the romantic storyline, and the B plot their careers, right? Their respective careers. But there could be like a more substantial B plot with supporting characters who are affecting the plot, some larger twists and turns in the plot, if it were interested in going that direction. And so I do think it is just sort of like a unique design for a musical. Normally, you want to have a sort of large character web because you want to have a lot of different numbers for people to do, and characters, and just the opportunity to create these clashes of style and ideology and all this stuff. And they didn't choose to do that in this case.
Yeah. One of the scenes that sticks out to me is the, sort of after Mia and Sebastian, they're in love and they've made all these plans, and then Emma Stone is on the phone with her mom. And, I think in some ways that scene is fine. She's talking to her mom, and he overhears her talking about like, well, no, he doesn't. He's saving up, and I think he has a plan, and essentially getting, the vibe of like, it's bad that he doesn't have money is like the message that he's receiving. But I think it's this weird thing where like that's like a whole turning point for him in his character. Like he does like a 180 based on half of an overheard phone call from the other room. And it stood out to me as like because there isn't a ton of, we don't see other characters pushing him further or raising that issue. There's that early scene with his sister, which is really fun, and she kind of comes in and names all the things, but we don't really get anybody else pushing really hard. Like, I guess it's hard for me to believe that he does that total 180 based on that. And if there were other characters or more opportunities or something else in that sort of B plot, C plot realm that was creating extra pressure, I think that could be an opportunity for different, like, musical numbers, sort of like you're suggesting will have to happen on Broadway, but might also make those inevitable swings like have more power. Like I feel like in romantic storylines, like I'm kind of thinking about Moulin Rouge, and I feel like there are moments in this that kind of tip their hat to Moulin Rouge, but the sort of twist that happens, in the midpoint, you get the sense of dread because you realize, oh, she's going to have to do that, and that's going to break his heart. I don't know what's going to happen. And I feel like there's no chance for dread in this romance. It's all surprise for me. It's like, oh, I guess he's decided now that Mia needs him to have lots of money, and so he's going to sign a contract without talking to her, and that's the plot now. And again, once it makes that decision, it's good and it's executed well and moves along. But those transitional moments, part of me feels like maybe if there was some supporting characters or other plot elements happening, it might smooth some of those transitions.
Yeah.
I think what's really interesting, because I think we're now circling around what for me is the weakest part of the movie, in a movie that I really love and adore. But I do think that whole sequence where, she's pursuing her own one woman show, and he is now signing the contract and going on tour, that culminates in that dinner scene where all of it falls apart. There's a lot of things named in that dinner scene that I wish we had seen. And so it's in that dinner scene, I actually really love some of the uncomfortable truths that come out that ring very true for a creative couple, where it's, he eventually says to her, maybe you just liked me when I was on my ass to make you feel better about yourself. And that's a really interesting, dramatic thing for a relationship like this. I wish maybe that had been dramatized up, before that moment. And I think there's attempts to dramatize the problem with him signing the contract and going on tour with when she goes to see his show with John Legend. But that is probably the one sequence in this movie that really falls flat for me, that musical sequence where they're doing the live performance. Because first of all, Emma Stone's character, is established early on as not loving jazz herself. She likes probably pop music. This is good music they're playing. It's it's a good catchy song with a good band on stage. It's not bad. And it feels like when the dancers come out, it's Damien Chazelle being no, but it's kind of bad. See the dancers, they're kind of goofy. And so it feels like the movie's straining there to tell me, wait, things aren't perfect. When in general, even Seb looks like he's having a pretty decent time. It's really Mia who's decided this is bad now. So yeah, I think that is an interesting. I agree with you, Michael. If we had more push and pull, more kind of bugs in their ears, questioning. If Mia had a friend who was wait, I thought he was gonna start a club. I thought he was dedicated to this thing. What do you mean he gave up on that? Or in his ear, you got to dedicate your life to this tour. This is your future now. If she's holding you back, keeping you in LA, you got to let her go. Whatever. Having those bugs in their ears so that it can culminate in that scene, and it's not just all named there with no evidence that precedes it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't disagree, but I will say that for me, I definitely read that scene as they could have done a big bubblegummy poppy thing that was really goofy and colorful and was a callback to him in the 80s band and that house scene or whatever. But to me, it was more her not being disgusted or anything like that, as much as just being oh, this is not at all what I thought you wanted to do with your life. Right. So it's yeah, he's in a successful band, but go to him in the jazz club being look, this is jazz. Look, he's just made up his own thing and he's doing his thing over there and they're constantly in conflict, but they, it all works together. And then cut to I'm on stage playing a synthesizer and there are dancers and everything like that. I think I read that scene more as her just being wait, is that, she even says do you like the music you're playing? And I agree that could have been set up more, but at the same time, for me, it made sense that she was sort of shocked by him being in something that was being involved in something in such a committed way that it seems to be so divorced from him wanting to open up a jazz club, right?
Yeah, maybe the song, maybe I liked the song too much, or the band. Well, sure. The band seems too actually musically it seems like the musicians have integrity in that band. There's a horn section and it doesn't, like you're saying, he could have gone all the way and had it be a bubblegum pop band that would be obviously so antithetical to his dreams. But the John Legend character is also genuinely from the same lineage as,
he has a whole speech about why he thinks this is the future of jazz.
He has a theory of trying to bring new generation to jazz. So I think that's where it gets really muddy for me, is that he's also, he hasn't totally abandoned all his ethics. He's with somebody who seems quite ethical and dedicated also to the art form. So that's where it just, I think there's something there that just does not work for me. And I think that scene is trying to bring it all together and it just feels so strained.
Yeah, and I think the other thing I was going to say was I think we talked about this a little in Last of Us. We talked about it a little with Interstellar, which is these sort of tonal modal shifts that things do, which is we're going to be, as gritty and character driven, and we're going to close up on this character's face and see every emotion they're feeling. And also we're a musical or a video game adaptation or a sci-fi movie. So it's like we're going to just kind of do some logical jumps once in a while and be like, sure, this thing over here. You know, I do like he's going to just drive to her house to be like, hey, you have a call back, you know, or whatever, like, which is lovely. But or like I said, she wears a white button up top to work and then she has to go straight to an audition, which means she's just wearing what she wore to work, which clearly her coworkers are also wearing. But then when she walks out of the audition, all the other women auditioning are also wearing white button-up tops. Now, that's like the most basic top you can be wearing. So it's not like a coincidence. It could just be a coincidence. But also to me, it's just like, sure, like you're making a musical where you want to show me this image of here's all the Mia clones, you know, that's fine. If you were making an incredibly gritty drama, I might question that more, but you're not.
Right.
But also you kind of are, right? So it's that sort of thing where I think this movie is trying to be several things at once. I think it handles it really, really well. But I think every once in a while we have those things that just feel like too much of a jump.
Right.
I think also it's hard to really know, again, without a This Is What I Want song, what like the clear picture of the dream for each of them is. Like we actually do know with Seb that it's a jazz club. He wants to own his own club. That's really nice and clear. Except that when we first see him, he's playing live jazz himself. So that's a little different than being, or, you know, he has that gig early on where he like goes off script and plays his own song and then J.K. Simmons fires him. But
not
it's
quite
like,
his tempo.
It is a little, that scene is a little bit different than being the owner of a jazz club, right? There's an element of like, does he actually want to be a performer? Does he want to be the owner of a jazz club? Is he a performer? We see him later playing in the Lighthouse where he's like kind of, you know, playing keys with the band that's on stage there. He seems really happy, and again, there's a performance aspect to it. So it's, again, a little different than owning your own club. And so I think that's what muddies it when it's like he's performing with the, what are they called? The messengers? He's performing with the messengers. Isn't performance also part of his dream, right? And it is in the jazz, whatever, like in the jazz world. And it's even more muddy with her, I think, where he tells her that she's actually also a writer. She's like, oh, I'm here because I want to be an actor, and I used to write and perform my own plays. And he's like, oh, you're a genius writer and actor. And then she writes her own play. So does she want to be just an actor, or is she also a writer? So when the play fails, is she failing as a writer, or is she failing as an actor? And in LA, we all know what that's like, right? That actually is a realistic, like lived-in portrayal of what it's like to chase a creative dream.
Too real.
Right? It totally is. And there's all these shades to it, right? Where we all probably have our line where we'd feel like that's a line I wouldn't cross, or I would feel like I no longer had artistic integrity. But there's shades of gray all the way up until we get to that line. And I think that for me, and I think what I'm hearing from you, Alex, is that the messengers actually still feel like a gray area. Like, wouldn't this also check some of your boxes, Sebastian? And, you know, when she ends up, you know, crushing it at the audition at the end, which is a beautiful scene, and I want to talk about it, there's an element to she's telling a story that's not written and scripted. So, but that isn't presumably going to be in the movie that she's in. So there's this kind of mix of like, does it have to be your original story, or would you be happy being just a successful actor saying other people's words? Do they have to be your words? I think that there's, again, just because the nature of what it is to pursue a creative career, especially in Los Angeles, it's a little bit all mixed up together. And probably for audience members, even, I would imagine even more so for audience members who are not in the industry or don't have like creative ambitions, it might be even harder to parse apart, like, is this the dream, or is this not the dream? Is it almost the dream? Is it kind of the dream? Is the money the dream? Is the fame the dream? Is, you know, I think there's a little bit of like an unclear picture here. Not that I don't still find it really compelling, because it directly speaks to my experience.
Right. Because I think I can read in. I'm a pretentious film person, so I can
Sure.
read into Seb that like I'm too pretentious
Same.
for this music, or I can read into Mia. I'm only writing this because I have to. I don't want to write my own movie, but I have to write it so I can direct it or act in it. So like all those things do help clarify it for me as an LA person.
Yeah, for sure.
I actually, as you were talking, I think I had the opposite thought where like I feel like only a pretentious like film person would be like, well, she wants to write and act. Like, is she a writer or is she an actor? Maybe
Right.
most people don't like think
Maybe
that
they
those are
don't
different
differentiate. Maybe
things.
it's easier for them.
You want to be a famous
Okay.
actor, period.
Right. Yeah. So
Mhm.
that might actually be like
That's an us problem.
we're viewing it in a higher resolution
As
than
per
other
usual.
people.
It's an us problem.
It's always an us problem.
Yeah. But I do think, I mean, yeah, like you said, let's talk about that audition scene and where the movie ends up. I think the ends of their arcs are clear, and it kind of ends up in a mostly you had to let go of what you wanted to get what you needed. It is a little murky because she gets to be a famous star kind of either way. But I feel like toward the end, at least, it starts to get into he is motivating her to do things she wouldn't have done otherwise, and that lets her get what she wants. But to really achieve the dream, like they can't be together. And so like where it resolves, I think, is in this sort of nice, they were the fuel for each other to reach something they couldn't have reached on their own. And this love, it'll be special, but you can't have it both ways, sort of thing. But it is interesting in that scene, like you were saying, Trisha, that she's improvising. It also doesn't seem like, I wasn't immediately clear, is it just that she performed better this time than she's ever performed before? But also that's not how auditions work. Like there's something a little muddy in there that I think is again smoothed over by just the execution and the performance and the music, all of that, that makes it all land ultimately.
And I think, yeah, once again, in that musical let go of logic, let yourself just feel it way, the fact that this audition in the end is a musical number, a really lovely song, I think is almost expressing, has she gone on enough of this arc where she has now landed in a place where she doesn't care anymore almost, or like she's lost everything. She's gone back home. She's given up on the dream. And only then, once you've kind of stopped trying, can you actually maybe get the dream. And that is often kind of, and maybe it's just us trying to put things into the hero's journey structure, but it does feel like often that is kind of a Hollywood story of like trying and trying and trying and trying for years. And then at some point, something just like kind of randomly happening that like at the time you didn't expect. And that's the big break, not when you were like pushing really hard and like trying really hard. And so I think to me, there's something about, maybe that wasn't the audition you were talking about, but that final audition when she's called for the movie in Paris, that plays for me as like that hero's journey of the artist, of you really give up and then kind of get back up one last time, and kind of in the most unexpected moments, the opportunity comes.
I think yes. I also read it in the lyrics of the song, right? Because the song itself is a celebration of going after your dream.
Right.
Wholeheartedly, right? She's telling the story about her aunt jumping into the river and how daring that is. And how, she talks about how she jumped into the river and the cold water shocked her. And it was, silly and impulsive and messy, and she would do it again. And that kind of abandon in terms of having to go after something with your whole heart. And it will break your whole heart, right? That's kind of what the chorus of the song is about. And so I think, to your point, Alex, it's about having or letting go of anything you might think that you have left to lose, but also any pretense of, keeping something back or having a safety net.
Right.
Just having to go after something with absolutely everything that you have. And it's a celebration of that abandon, especially for a creative pursuit. And that's like, Damien Chazelle has made some more expensive and movies that we might argue are bigger swings than this one. But I think the celebration of that wholehearted pursuit of something that you care about just because you believe in it for no other reason. And I think that's what makes this land for me, because she doesn't, have any way of knowing what way that this audition is going to go. Obviously it's interesting. The editing's really interesting in that scene where they don't cut to the people at all. We have no idea how the song is being received. We have no idea.
Is she even singing, or is
she even really? Yeah.
Just
What's
the movie
what's reality?
Dramatization of?
Oh yeah, I assume she's not singing there.
Totally. But again, not having any reaction of no way to gauge what's happening. But I do think it just kind of pulls the movie all into one, into one little song, into one scene, into a couple of moments. And it's through a story. She's just telling a story, which is what they ask her to do. So I just really love the sort of meta aspect of what the song is about, but also just sort of a statement of the theme.
Yeah, that song makes me emotional every time, because it's
beautiful.
It cuts right to the heart of it, that we've all been there.
Yeah.
Well, why don't we rewind all the way back to the very beginning of the movie,
which is what the ending does.
Yeah. There's a weird sliding doors, almost split type of what if. That's interesting and really fun. But yeah, going back to the very beginning of the movie, the opening scene that announces this movie as what it is in it of itself a big swing, sets the stage. I'm really curious to hear everyone's first reactions to this, and then talk a little bit about the making of, because I feel like it encapsulates so much of what this movie is, all there right up in the beginning.
Could be brave or just insane. We'll have to see. 'Cause maybe rolls around and it's another day of sun. Still I'm reaching for light and chasing all the lights that shine. It's another day of sun.
Typical morning in LA traffic.
Absolutely.
Yeah, what an opening.
Yeah. So one of the things I love about, honestly, this whole movie, but how it begins is it cares about LA as a city full of people, lots of different people. It's a multicultural city. As we begin, we're passing through these different cars. We're hearing the different songs they're playing on the radio. And it gives you this feeling of this could have been any one of these people's stories. We just happened to go into this car. It's almost like a Nightmare Before Christmas when he wanders into the forest, and it's which door is he going to open? Oh, he opened that door, and then that's a Christmas movie. So I really like that. I really like that, with the casting, obviously. I love the moment when they open up the truck, all the people pour out. It feels like there's this really cool celebration of LA, holistically, that I think is really fun and gives this so much energy. The cinematography and the approach to it, obviously, there's a lot of long takes, there's a lot of wide angles. It's clear immediately that they actually did this on a freeway. That's insane. And so this movie is announcing itself again as this big swing, as trying really hard to kind of honestly reach further than I think it even has the means to do. I honestly feel that when I watch this. It's I think you barely made this happen. Yeah. And I think the way I've seen you shoot other scenes, that level of production value and stuff, you clearly couldn't do here. You made this really hard for yourself, and I can feel it barely working, but it does work. And so I feel just it is embodying the kind of thematic message of the movie in and of itself, this opening scene.
Oh, yeah.
It also announces right away that this isn't going to be, as you were identifying, Brian, kind of the Broadway stage musical now on screen, but rather the way it's shot, with, real sunlight on a real freeway out just in the open here. you're bringing these kind of musical elements and musical choreography into the real world and into this kind of gritty space, but we're not kind of transitioning into like a CGI or a soundstage reality here. We do that later in the movie, but I think it's just announcing that this is not going to be that kind of musical only. This is playing with going between like the gritty reality and the musical exuberance in a different way than maybe you're used to.
That's what I was going to say, which is that it feels like a perfect marriage of the movies that it's drawing on, the like classic Hollywood, films, musicals, with the color palette is also bright and the music is so uplifting and the dance, there's nothing cynical about it at all. It's so earnest. It's doing all of that, and yet it is keeping it grounded in this way where like I feel like I can feel the heat and the car roofs and the steepness of the grade of the thing. And just like I can feel the passion of the people making it to make it in this way outdoors in traffic, right? It's celebrating the shiny Hollywood dream and also the traffic. It's celebrating both of those things at the same time. And I feel like that's what the movie tries to do with, throughout. It's celebrating, hey, you might get the dream. You also might not end up with the person that you were in love with, right? It doesn't have the Hollywood ending. And so it's kind of prepping you for that in the approach to this number.
And this is also where In the Heights came to mind to me. It's just that sort of like everything feels sweaty and, it doesn't feel like very like clean cut. It feels it doesn't feel dirty or gritty, but it feels more like a movie than a lot of musical movies do. We just talked about Chicago, which is like very stylized in a way that works great for that movie. But that movie is not ever trying to like feel normal. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I was talking to Anna about this scene today. So she plays the hula hooper in this movie because she's a hula hoop artist on the roof there. And she was saying, it's 2.5 days of shooting in September in Los Angeles on a real freeway. It's 100 degrees. It's 100 actual degrees.
God.
And the people in the musicians in the truck, you have to at least shut it for a solid minute while you just wait for the camera to get there, between when you say action and cut. And I just, the car roofs are reinforced, but they really are dancing on real car roofs that are,
right.
It feels just, the texture to it is there.
Yeah.
And then the other two things I wanted to say, one was, I don't know that I'd ever actually looked at like the lyrics of the verses to this song and realizing that it's just the plot of the movie, right? Like, like he was sweet and it was true. Still, I knew what I had to do. Maybe one day he'll sit, the lights are down, and he'll see my face and think of how he used to know me. Just like, yep, that is what these characters are going to do in this movie. And the other thing, the idea of this Another Day of Sun, obviously is presented as like a hopeful thing, in this movie. Like you're going to be let down, but then tomorrow, like the sun will come up again tomorrow, kind of a vibe. But also, you can look at it either way. I've always said I had this weird moment when I first moved to LA where I was in some studio apartment and driving to like some crappy temp job that I got. And yet I'm like on the freeway with my window down, blaring music. And it's a beautiful, like sunny, warm day. And I look out the window and I see the ocean. And I'm like, man, I made it. I'm so successful right now. Meanwhile, like the star of a Broadway show in New York is like taking the subway back to his apartment that's slightly bigger than his body. Someone pees on him on the way. It's pouring down rain. You know what I mean? And it's just like, that person's like really successful and just feels miserable all the time. And in a weird way, that kind of thing can make you feel like you always need to try harder. Whereas LA can almost have this like false sense of satisfaction to it too. So
totally.
The Another Day of Sun, there's so many things that could mean. It could also mean, hey, I don't care how miserable you are. The sun is still going to be there. It's still like, it could be taken as a cynical way of just like, there's always going to be this hopeful sort of like vibe being thrown at you, whether you want it or not. But I do like, obviously, to start this movie that it feels it's doing more of the hopeful side of that.
I just want to call out that this reminds me of, it's kind of an Obama era like music video. I feel like, there was that, remember that Happy 24-hour LA music video. That might have been after La La Land, but the Pharrell Williams happy experiment or whatever. But yeah, I think that just like there's a ethos and a aesthetic to this that feels very of this era. And it's fun to go back to there right now.
Yeah. One of the other things I want to call out about this sequence that I just really love is the dance circle and the like community aspect of it. Think about how different this sequence would feel without that part. Like there is still a nice kind of community feeling to it where the first dancer gets out of the car and then like people join her and they're all walking together straight towards the camera. But it would feel a little bit less, I don't know, just like a little bit less warm or welcoming. I think that there's a really critical aspect that it sets up that, it, ultimately doesn't end up going on to reinforce in the movie, where we don't get a strong sense of a community around Mia and Sebastian. But it kind of creates this warmth to that here where it's like, even if we don't know each other, we're all in the same boat. We're all striving for the same dream. And so the spontaneous feeling of the dance circle and the different styles of dance, you're pointing out the multiculturalness of the city. And I watched that interview with the choreographer today, which I really recommend. It was I can't remember but if you Google the choreographer, whose name is Mandy Moore, not that one, but if you Google her, you'll get a cool interview with her where she breaks the sequence down. And she was saying that, she and Damien really wanted to make sure the different dance cultures were represented in that circle and that there was a cheering for all of them and as they were handing off between styles, because it doesn't only look like one thing to, make it in this city or to be welcome in this city. Yeah.
Yeah. Honestly, like for me watching this movie, that moment is the moment that like makes movie for me. Like I think were that not in here, I don't know that I would interface with it the same. But as you're saying, it announces itself as the communal love version of trying to achieve the dream. This isn't like an All About Eve where it's like stab everyone in the back and bring and tear others down because this is a zero-sum game. Like this is a generous, optimistic celebration of the dream. And I think those stories are pretty rare too. And I love that this movie celebrates that version of the dream.
Exactly. And one of the things I've always loved about LA, I've lived here 20 years now, and there is that sense of like anyone can make it and there's room for everyone to make it, right? This industry is big enough that you can, you don't have to be an A-list star to work in the movie business. you can work in the movie business. You can. There's room for you. Like, I think that that's one thing I've always really appreciated about it. And like the movie corner of the movie business that I work in is small and feels silly sometimes. But I get to do it. I get to be here, and I've never felt like I can't, or like that. It can be discouraging and hard, but it still feels like things can turn in an instant. And that's part of the mythos of Hollywood and LA, that all you need is one person to say yes to you at one time and you can just work. Like you can be here.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that this movie holds that while also holding the reality that like, it's not going to come without sacrifice, but like
totally.
It's kind of a non-judgmental way of celebrating all of that at once, which is pretty cool. Why don't we go around and say what lessons we're going to take from La La Land? Alex, do you want to start us off?
Sure. Yeah, thinking about the ending of this movie, I remember, I mentioned at the beginning of this conversation that this came out of the moment where kind of my progression in my career had stalled. And so I was a little bit peeved at the development when it went to 5 years later. And it's like, she's the movie star she's always wanted to be. I'm like, that doesn't happen. That never happens. Boo. And was kind of annoyed with the idea of like the moral of the movie essentially kind of being like, go for your career, not for like loved ones. I kind of read it in that way of like, it was worth sacrificing the life you could have had with this man for the career you want. And kind of being like, that's not what movies are supposed to tell me. They're supposed to tell me like love above all. Like, what is this? But I now really respect this ending because it is kind of a mature ending in a way. it's still very unlikely to become an A-list star. That's still like a miracle that happens to Mia. But I think those things do happen. And I do appreciate that her life is portrayed as just like a perfectly good life with a very nice guy. It seems like she has a daughter. I like that the movie, like we were just saying, is kind of generous in it's like the success that people like. She's not successful but miserable because she like had to stab her boyfriend in the back. She has, there was a trajectory and she went this way and she made a great life for herself that way. And Seb has also done his own thing and has landed where he wants to land in. So basically my lesson is I appreciate this movie knows what it's about ultimately at the end, which is it's not a movie about love above all else or, like career is second to this. I actually kind of appreciate that it's a movie about striving towards a dream, a career, and that's ultimately what the characters choose to do. And there is this bittersweet sacrifice at the core of it. And I like the movie commits to that and then makes you feel the bittersweetness of that choice in the ending. So yeah, I don't know if there's a lesson there except for I think I was wrong back in the day and it was the right choice. And I respect the movie for making that choice.
Nice. Yeah, I agree. It hits in a bittersweet way because it's unpredictable. It's not following the kind of moral that you're expecting, like you're saying, of like she made it, but at what cost? And it is almost like a more mature, layered theme because of that. Like both of them made their decisions, and he sacrificed for her to like succeed and all this stuff. I think that's really layered, combined with that amazing finale number that goes full old school musical that's just lovely and then like drops you back there and breaks your heart. I think those two things combined really elevate this film and like leave you walking out of the theater like I feel like you have to be moved. I don't know if you can experience this finale and not feel something.
I was really surprised by how emotional I got on the last viewing of this movie. At multiple moments, including that "Here's to the ones who dream" song. Like that also got me really emotional. And yeah, it's he did it. He works. He got me the bittersweet is always what gets me, and he got me with the bittersweet.
Yeah. Trisha, what's your lesson?
Well, yeah, this is just related to my lesson, which is if you want to make movies, you should probably watch a lot of movies.
Mm-hmm.
Like a lot of movies. Damien Chazelle watches a lot of movies. Like, and the influences on this movie are really evident. And so I think that, this is obviously a celebration of the film industry and of cinema and cinema history. As is Babylon in some ways. But like, I really think that when I watch this movie, I just appreciate how intelligently it's put together because it isn't just in some of the more obvious homages and references. It's in the very fabric of the way that the style is approached and just the cinematic language. I can see the fingerprints of all the influences all over it. We talk about this sometimes too with the Coen brothers, who are my favorite filmmakers. And just like when you watch their movies, it's so clear that they understand the shape of what a movie is and the imperative of what it means to make a movie. And I feel like this is a movie that so clearly understands itself as a movie and its place as a movie while drawing on, French, Jacques Demy films like Umbrellas of Cherbourg and The Color Palette and the MGM musicals. And like, it's pulling from all of these places and more recent musical influences. It's doing all of this stuff at once. And I think that, I can see when I watch it that the costume design and the production design and the music, they're all pointing towards this vision of where do we put our movie in the context of film history and what does it mean as it pulls from all of that and yet makes its own place. And I just appreciate that so much about it.
Yeah, 100%. Brian, what's your lesson?
Yeah, my lesson is a structural lesson, which is if you've ever been confused about the whole 3 act structure, but the second act is longer and split into 2 halves. So then why isn't it just 4 act structure? I think this is the movie to study, because I think it's really, if you look at the second act as a standalone, as a complete thought, it's they start spending time together, they break up. That is the arc of the second act. But Act 2A is everything leading up to the observatory sequence of them actually getting together. Boom, time jump. Now we're in Act 2B. They're together now. A relationship has been established. John Legend is introduced. He's going to create a new conflict for them that is eventually going to end to them breaking up. So I think it's a really good example of a movie where Act 2A is its own complete thought, Act 2B is its own complete thought, but then together, they don't feel like 2 separate acts. They feel like they're 2 halves of the same bigger thought, right? And in the same way that all 3 acts feel like, like the way that it all should tie together like that. But I just found the time jump really effective, where I was just being like, oh, I don't know if I expected this to happen now. And then once it all came together, I sort of felt that Act 2A is its own thing, Act 2B is its own thing, but they're together to make something bigger that feels like one complete piece of this movie.
Yeah, totally. And you can feel it in this movie too. I feel like
that's
it's another
yeah.
great one of like, you experience it viscerally as it goes. Yeah, my lesson, it's sort of like 2 small lessons. Earlier, Alex, you identified in the argument scene, me and Sebastian are throwing these accusations at each other and these like truths and revelations that we didn't have evidence of. And that made me kind of just think about the importance of foreshadowing and when it's useful. I feel like the audience needs to have some sense of like what could happen. And if everything is a surprise, I think it's not always the visceral feeling that you want. So like knowing what could happen is a more specific kind of engagement than I wonder what's going to happen. And so foreshadowing is just one of the tools you can use to kind of put that in your story. And I think this movie has a good example of it. There's the City of Stars sequence where then, they've danced up Griffith Hill, and then Ryan Gosling goes and wanders in Santa Monica on the beach. I don't know how I got there that fast, but he sort of has this line of like, is this just another dream that I can't make true? And the music kind of changes, and it sort of signals like, oh, maybe there's something, not good in the future. And that made me like lean forward this time. I'm like, oh, something's going to happen. So foreshadowing, I think, is a really useful tool. And cast for chemistry. These 2 leads it's not fair.
Yeah.
I said it's cheat codes earlier, but really it's just that like we want to feel human emotion when we go to things, and structure and all these kind of intellectual things are working toward that. Like that is the point of them, is use these tools to create human emotion. But if you can just cast 2 people that you just love to watch, like why not do that? That gets you so much. So if you're making a love story, cast for chemistry.
Pretty important for a love story. Yeah.
Very important. Yes. Awesome. Okay. Well, so we're going to talk about what else we've been watching. Before we do, just a reminder that as our Big Swing summer continues, last week we talked about Interstellar, which is really fascinating. Next week, we are talking about AI, artificial intelligence. I have not seen this movie since theaters. I was so confused as a 13-year-old or whatever it was. I did not know what to make of it. And
You haven't watched it since you were 13?
No. I'm honestly a little afraid of what I'm going to see. So that's going to be really fascinating to talk about.
Yes, it will be.
It was deeply disturbing as a 13-year-old.
Yeah. That ending. Man. Okay. Anyway. But what else have you guys been watching? Brian, what have you been watching recently?
Well, since we're talking about Emma Stone being good at comedy, I recently saw Easy A for the first time.
You hadn't seen Easy A?
I haven't seen it either.
Oh my God, it's so good.
It's great. Yeah. And there's a weird thing like word of mouth movies or books or shows or games or whatever, where it's like you see the trailer or whatever and you're like, oh, okay, that looks like this thing over there that maybe I'll check out someday or whatever. And then you just start to hear people be like, no, it's actually good. Like The Pit is that right now, which I haven't seen, but it's just like everyone's just like, oh no, it's like it's the thing you think it is, but it's like an incredibly okay, if you say so. And it was really lovely to watch it, having spent this much time now with Emma Stone as like a performer, right? We're like going back and watching this and just seeing like how strong she already was. Except the one thing that made me mad about the movie was how good Patricia Clarkson and Stanley Tucci are as her parents.
I knew you were going to say that. They're so amazing.
I was like,
I haven't seen this movie either, and that just sold me on it. Not that it needed to be sold beyond Emma Stone, but
I mean, they're very much written as just, like Trisha, like help me put it into words, just like
the coolest parents you could ever have.
Cool, and they just have this second nature language to the way they communicate with each other and everything. To the point where when the movie went on to like continue being the movie, I was just like, I don't want this. I want to go back and hang out with these guys. Can I switch like the camera angle? Tonally the movie is not my kind of thing for the most part, but it's just as the word of mouth told me, is just a really good version of that. So really had a lovely time with it. And if you haven't seen it, I recommend Easy A.
Nice. Okay, cool. Alex, what have you been watching?
So I started watching the new season of Turning Point, which is a very well done documentary series on Netflix. I don't know if there's seasons or anthology series, whatever you want to call them, but yeah, they did a series on the bomb and the Cold War, which was excellent and so educational for me about the Cold War, and just really compelling. It's really compelling documentary filmmaking where you're just riveted, even though it's archival footage and talking heads for the most part. And the Vietnam War is just as messy and fraught a topic as the Cold War, and it's so fascinating. And it's, they do a really great job in both of the series I've seen. There's also one about the 9/11 and the War on Terror, which I have not seen. But in each case, they really are good at saying, we are still living with the consequences of this era that we are now taking a deep dive into. And these are eras that have defined the world and America in ways that we are still reaping. And so, yeah, if you want to go down that rabbit hole, the Vietnam War, fascinating, horrifying, really well done.
Nice. Okay, cool. Trisha, what have you been watching?
Yeah, after I watched La La Land, I was talking to my niece about it and geeking out to myself about all of its influences. And it made me really want to go rewatch An American in Paris. So I did that this week, which was really fun. I hadn't seen it in quite a while. It's a Gene Kelly musical, 1951. I had seen it a number of times back in the day, but watching it again, it's so good. Like, I don't know. It's a Gershwin musical, as a lot of these Gene Kelly musicals are. And it's a love story. It's just lovely. It's a lot of what you'd expect: dancing, singing. The influence on La La Land are ridiculous. Like, if you haven't seen it, it's just so, like, La La Land is so much An American in Paris. And I love the sequence in An American in Paris that it feels like the finale of La La Land is drawing on, which is just like going into abstracted space. And in An American in Paris, it's this really like French, like artistic, what's the word I'm looking for? Expressionist kind of painting style to the way that the sets and the costumes are created. It's very artsy. And it's all just music and dance and no singing. It's really just like an extended dance sequence where they wander through a number of sort of abstracted spaces. And there were a few of these, I think Singing in the Rain has kind of this long one with Broadway melody and stuff where they're just like, we're just going to be on a soundstage with some built sets for a while and just do a whole like 10-minute long dance sequence or whatever. But the one in American in Paris was just really beautiful to me this time around. So if you haven't seen it, I really strongly recommend, especially if you enjoy La La Land. It's kind of a must watch.
Nice.
And its sequel, An American Werewolf in London.
Yep.
No, stop it, Brian.
Thanks.
You're stuck with me.
That's so rude.
Well, speaking of industry fare, I've been watching The Studio on Apple
Oh,
TV
boy.
Plus. So The Studio is Seth Rogen becomes the head of a sort of dying out studio and is in charge with like revitalizing it. And so with this kind of loose premise is he's a cinephile and he wants to make art films and he thinks really highly of what they do and like, I'm an artist, we are artists. But also he's, in charge of making the next, the Kool-Aid movie, which needs to make more money than Barbie.
So good.
And yeah, it was a little hard for me to get into it first. The style is Birdman-esque. It's a lot of like true long takes. It's an anxiety infused half hour to spend as you watch him do things where you just want to shake him and be like, no, why are you doing that? Stop being like that.
Everybody's yelling.
Everybody's just yelling constantly. It looks like it's really fun to make. And so it took me a little bit to kind of reconcile the style and the kind of larger than life content. But ultimately I had a really fun time with it. It's one of those things that is totally comfortable taking place now in our reality. Like this year, we're talking about like MGM, like Amazon just bought MGM, and like what else are they trying to like take over? Like screw those people. There's a ton of ridiculous cameos.
By like random directors that you would only know if you like were like really interested in the film. Like, look, they're playing themselves. Like I feel like 90% of people watching the show are like, I have no idea.
Right. Yeah. Like, who Martin Scorsese is, but not that guy. Not like, and like nodding to indie movies and, these big budget movies. Zoe Kravitz is in it a lot. Anyway, so it's really fun ultimately. And it, like La La Land in a lot of ways, is a celebration of the movie industry and is trying to, in its own way, celebrate what makes the movie special. So The Studio, I actually really recommend. It's pretty fun.
Agree. But
I'm
also
scared.
Yeah.
But okay.
The first episode gave me so much anxiety.
Yeah. my partner is like, I can do maybe 2 at a time, but like 1 or 2 and that's it. And then like, let me have a few days to cool off. We can watch another, but we always enjoy it when we do.
Yeah. I don't think you could do it all together. Really, they cheated because they made a film noir episode where he's like finds himself as like a detective trying to figure out like who stole the missing canister from Olivia Wilde's best day of shooting. Anyway, it's like
That's how they
it's
got
insane.
it.
Okay, I'll watch it. Okay.
It's really fun.
Although my pitch for that episode is it's an episode made by someone who thinks they know what Chinatown is.
Sure.
Sure.
Because it's nothing like Chinatown, but it feels like it keeps referencing Chinatown
Right.
in a way that like kind of feels brilliant.
Yeah, it's really fun. Cool. All right. Well, this has been our conversation about La La Land. We want to say a big thank you, as always, to the patrons that make this show possible. Thank you for supporting the show. If you want to support us, head over to the Beyond Screenplay Patreon, where there are over 65 Patreon exclusives. We're releasing a new exclusive every month. You get ad-free episodes. You get access to our Discord, where these conversations are happening all the time. It's really fun. Thank you to our producer, Vince Major. Thank you to our editor, Mike Wuerth, and the whole Nebula Studios team. I'm Michael Tucker, and I've been joined today by Trisha Arand, Brian Bittner, and Alex Calleros. And we will see you next week for our discussion of AI, artificial intelligence.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.